Stanley's laws, bro. Hold on, bro. I'm cooking right now. To breathe air, you need oxygen. Hold on, boy. I ain't gonna lie, bro. I feel like I got onto something, bro. Put me in a history book, bro. I'm not gonna lie. Kelvin, famous historical events that never actually happened. Give me Martin Luther King for 500. That was not real. I'm joking. I'm joking.
Famous historical events that never actually happened.
W9.
All right, this is a big one. Einstein failing math in high school. This trope has been used by underachievers since the middle of the 20th century to excuse their crappy grades. Hey mom, you should be happy with that D I got in math. Even Einstein failed math. You could even say I'm smarter than Einstein. Hate to break it to you, but it's not true. You better get used to making those fries. Einstein was a mathematical genius.
Yeah, I was about to say, and even then, I feel like basic math in high school isn't that hard. Like, at what point does math in high school become hard? Are we going algebra? Are we going geometry? That's math, right? Geometry's math. I'll say I was cool with math until they started throwing numbers in my shit, or until they started throwing letters in my shit. But even then, I was still good at it. I say I wasn't struggling with math until like we had to start forming sentences. Like, if this, then this is why this. Instead of like answering questions with numbers, I was answering questions with sentences. You guys get what I'm saying? Like,
genius, pretty much from the jump. By age 12, he was studying algebra and geometry on his own. And by 14 or 15, he was already delving into calculus, several years ahead of most of his peers. The struggles that he did have in school were with subjects that required a rigid rote style learning, like history and French. No one's sure where the myth originated exactly, but the best theory suggests that it came from the fact that Einstein went to school in Switzerland, and the Swiss use a grading system from 1 to 6, with 6...
Statistics! Statistics was a different type of grind. Statistics is a different type of grind.
The best grade and 1 being the worst. And that was the opposite of the rest of Europe, where 1 was the top grade. Einstein himself even addressed this myth in an article in the Times magazine. When shown a clip...
Einstein was around for Times magazine? Excuse me? How old is Albert Einstein? Why was Albert Einstein in Times magazine? Excuse me? Are we not... Hello? Like, what are we...
claiming he had failed math, he reportedly laughed and said, "I have never failed in mathematics. Before I was 15, I had mastered differential and integral calculus." Terrible news for the slackers.
My goodness.
In the US, school children are taught from an early age that the courageous Christopher Columbus set off on an epic journey to prove that the Earth was round and not flat. Cool story, but completely
Was that what he left for? I thought he left for land.
In reality, Columbus had the idea in his head that the Atlantic Ocean was much smaller than was commonly thought, and that he could sail east on the Atlantic and find a shortcut to Asia. In fairness to Chris, people had only known the Earth was round for about 2,000 years. As early as the 6th century BCE, Greek philosophers like Pythagoras speculated that the Earth was round.
I'm sorry,
later in the 4th century BCE, Aristotle noted that the Earth casts a lunar eclipse, and that the travelers going south see new constellations rise in the sky, both of which are consistent with a spherical planet. And in the 3rd century BCE, the Greek mathematician Eratosthenes calculated the Earth's circumference with remarkable accuracy using simple geometry. His estimate was around 25,000. Pretty good guess, since the real number is roughly 24,901 miles. And given that he was using pretty much just sticks, that is insanely impressive.
That is crazy.
So what did Chris actually prove? Mainly, he proved that when it came to guessing the size of the Atlantic Ocean or how to get to Asia, he pretty much sucked. Although technically you could get to Asia by sailing east from Spain, your path is going to be going through North, South, and Central America. The scholars of the day theorized the ship couldn't take enough supplies to make the journey. Had Columbus not landed on Cuba, there's no question that he and his crew would have run out of supplies a long time before they got to Asia. From the time they enter grade school, American children are taught about 6-year-old George Washington receiving an axe as a gift, and then going out and chopping down his father's cherry tree.
George Washington's go. Wait. What? How does it go? I want to sit under my own vine tree with no one in my... and the nation we've made. And I'm soon to see my many errors, but after 45 years, my service dedicated to the seal of the Yo, y'all don't know about George Washington going home on Alexander Hamilton and it shows, bro. Hey, who said life be lifing? You have fantastic elite ball knowledge. George Washington going home is literally my favorite song off Hamilton.
When his father asked who did it, because, yeah, apparently seeing a 6-year-old boy holding a hatchet that was dripping with cherry tree sap, young George replied, 6-year-old boy holding a hatchet that was dripping with cherry tree sap wasn't enough of a clue. Young George replied, "I cannot tell a lie. You know I cannot tell a lie. I did cut it with my hatchet." And instead of getting angry, his father gave him such a big old hug and told George how proud he was to have an honest son. Before we get to how this story isn't true at all, can we start with the obvious question? Namely, who in the hell gives an axe to a 6-year-old child? I know gift options were a lot.
And do you know how heavy an axe is?
More limited back then. No video games, no Hot Wheels. But an axe? What did the grandfather of America think was gonna happen? Anyway, this whole cherry tree thing wasn't told as a true story, but as a simple way to create basically a fable. Since the USA was a young nation, there was a desire in those early days to transform from historical individuals into almost mythical heroes. And who better to—
This is such a random hot take. This is the problem with the NBA. The NBA is so cool now. It's so chill. It's so nonchalant. Everybody's, oh, basketball this, fashion that. Oh my gosh, I get to play sports and it's just cool. Like, I don't even be working harder than nobody who has to wake up and work a job in the morning and da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, okay, I get it. Okay, that's cool. But the fans want to make you look cool, bro. I need you to act like I need them to make hoopers seem like deities again. It's people inside of Planet Fitness that think they can hang with you, gang. It's people inside of 24-hour fitnesses that think that they can hang with you, gang. It's people on blacktops that think that they can hang with NBA players, gang. And it's because of the lack of making y'all seem fictional, bro. Because they made you seem so realistic. Oh, they're so grounded. It's great. I'm so happy that y'all are sentient. I'm so happy you guys are conscious. But now people think they can bang with y'all in basketball and it's y'all's fault. Y'all don't want to be mythical no more. Patrick Mahomes turned his body like this and throw the football like this. You got 50 white all looking at him like he's Jesus. You get what I'm saying? But a basketball player pulls up from 40. And now it's, oh, man, basketball's so easy, gang. I could probably make that shot too. I'm telling you, bro, it's the same problem with the NBA. I know we got off topic. I'm just passionate about this, bro. The NBA needs to do this right here, bro.
In those early days to transform from historical individuals into almost mythical heroes. And who better to go all mythy on than the leader of the Continental Army and the first president? The cherry tree story first appeared in a book written by Mason Locke Weems in 1800, just a year after Washington's death. And the first clue that the story was BS? This was the 5th edition of the book, but the first time the cherry tree was mentioned. Anyway, yeah. Just crazy how it got so popular. The Chicago Fire. The Great Chicago Fire of 1871 is one of the most infamous disasters in American history, taking over 300 lives and leaving over 100,000 residents homeless.
Dang.
And if you remember hearing about the fire, it's almost certainly because you know the story of Mrs. O'Leary's cow knocking over a lantern and kicking off the whole shebang. And
I've never heard that a day in my life. I'm sorry. That did not leak into the black diaspora. Is there any like black person in here who knew this?
Since buildings in the 1800s were mainly constructed of dry wood and oily rags, it didn't take long for the bovine blaze to grow, eventually jumping the Chicago River and destroying much of downtown Chicago. And how did the cow get the blame for this horrific event? Well, by now you may not be surprised to find out it was completely made up by an unscrupulous newspaper reporter who was looking for clicks. Or, as they called it back then, selling newspapers. The story had 4 of the things that Americans hated the most. Mrs. O'Leary was poor, she was Irish, she was Catholic, and last of all, she was a woman. People were looking for a convenient scapegoat, and Catherine O'Leary checked all the boxes. The story's main promoter was a journalist named Michael Ahern.
You see what they do when they just hate you? They'll just make the story about you. When they just hate you, it don't even gotta make sense. They'll just make the story about you. Remember that. Who later admitted that he made up the whole cow kicking the lantern detail to spice up his report. But that admission was too little too late, because the cow story had already taken hold and started to grow some seriously deep roots. Many investigations were done in the following years, but the exact cause could never be determined. They did establish that the fire began near or in the O'Leary's barn, but there is no solid evidence that Catherine O'Leary or her cow had anything to do with it. Catherine always said that she was in bed when the fire started. For all we know, it could have been careless smoking by a goat or a grease fire in the kitchen by one of the pigs. Over time, historians have come up with a couple of pretty solid theories about the fire. Refreshingly, neither theory involves any sort of farm animal. First, maybe neighborhood boys started it while sneaking a cigarette. That makes sense, because in the 1870s, all those 8-year-old boys wanted to do after a grueling 12-hour workday in the factory was come back home and enjoy a nice, relaxing cigarette. The other theory sounds a little bit wacky, but it's plausible. A meteor shower could have sparked fires across the region, in Michigan and Wisconsin. I don't believe that one.
Unlike a lot of completely made-up myths, the story of Isaac Newton and the apple has a tiny bit of truth to it.
The one where they like fell on his head on some shit.
The story we've all heard is that Newton's lounging in his garden, sometime in the 1660s. Suddenly an apple falls, bonks him in the head, and voila! Newton immediately had the fully formed universal law of gravitation ready to publish.
Yeah.
The truth is, as Newton said later in life,
Gravitation.
he was sitting in his garden after dinner, drinking tea underneath an apple tree. When he saw an apple fall to the ground, he began to think about the force that made the apple fall straight down, not side to side and not at an angle. But it wasn't a eureka moment. It was just one step on a journey that would take over 20 years and culminate with the publication of his Principia Mathematica in 1687.
I heard Bilu and Zias talk about it where they were like, bro, people who are like philosophers and scientists back in the day, bro, they really like found out all this like dumb stuff. It had me rolling. Let me see if I can find the clip. I doubt I find this clip. This is such a niche clip. Oh my gosh, there's no way.
What made Isaac Newton so special, though?
I thought niggas back, bro, they couldn't say anything and niggas was smart.
Yeah.
3 + 2 = pi. Like, what do you mean? Like, back in the day, you could have made anything up and that shit was legit. Like, nigga, we doing math today.
You feel like a lot of niggas from back in the day is overrated?
Got looked up,
yeah,
bro.
they was like, they just said the shit first
like,
and like.
Now it's like, oh, y'all gotta follow us.
Come on,
because
like,
the first one
yeah.
here. But really, if I was the first one here, I could have said some crazy shit and it'd be still here today.
You feel me?
But these seem like pretty basic as like, you know, an object at rest stays at rest. Bilu.
He said, an object at rest stays at rest. Bilu. No, but I know what y'all saying, but it does sound dumb though. Like, bro, if I put this right here and I don't touch it from right here, bro, that joke's gonna stay right there. Like, of course, like, it's almost like, bro, why are we even writing that down, bro? Like, you get what I'm saying, bro? I get what they mean, gang. I get what they mean, bro.
Bro.
Really, nigga?
Bro, an object at rest stays at rest. But they just made it sound like, you know what I'm saying? Like
duh, nigga.
Like, obviously.
This the nigga we crawling as a motherfucking genius?
Bro, I ain't gonna lie, they need an AI Photoshop me on that nigga, on me.
An object in motion stays
in motion.
No shit, nigga! Why, bro,
I ain't gonna lie, Z, that's crazy.
They just made any nigga.
I ain't gonna lie, that's crazy, Z.
Hold on, what made Isaac Newton so special, though?
I thought
Oh my gosh, bro. Newton getting canceled his research department. First scientist to confront and reconsider Isaac Newton. Object at rest stays at rest. Imagine if I was like, a stream that doesn't turn off is on. Hold on, chat. I think I'm spitting something. Hold on, chat. A person who talks is saying things. Hold on, chat. Stanley's laws, bro. Stanley's laws, bro. Hold on, bro. I'm cooking right now. To breathe air, you need oxygen. Hold on, boy. I ain't gonna lie, bro. I feel like I got onto something, bro. Put me in a history book, bro. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, I feel him.
Backed by an apple. Nero. Everyone's seen some variation of Nero, the crazed Roman emperor, wildly fiddling as he watched Rome burn. It's an image that's seared in our brains, and the expression can be heard even today. But there are a couple reasons why we know this powerful image is completely made up. First of all, the fire that destroyed about 2/3 of Rome happened in 64 CE. Roughly 1,000 years before the violin was invented. If you were playing anything, he likely would have been playing a kithara, kind of lyre. And if he had been playing it that day, he would have been playing it at his villa in Antium, since most historians agree he wasn't even in Rome when the fire started. The earliest and most detailed accounts of the fire come from Roman historians Tacitus, Suetonius, and Cassius Dio. All three of them wrote long after Nero's death, and their writing reflects a mixture of facts, hearsay, and moral judgment. Tacitus, writing about 50 years after the death of the emperor, reports on the rumors at the time that Nero started the fire to clear the way for a huge palace. At the same time, he notes that Nero wasn't even in Rome at the time, and when he got word of the fire, quickly came back to Rome to coordinate relief efforts, and opened his palaces to refugees, and arranged food supplies. It even seems like tales of Nero's exploits have been exaggerated for effect, because he was a very unconventional ruler who acted on stage, raced chariots, and fancied himself a musician. All scandalous for a Roman emperor. His supposed performance during the fire was probably meant to be symbolic. The narrative caught fire because it fit the existing stereotype of a decadent ruler more interested in art than duty. Marie Antoinette. Many factors contributed to the French Revolution, but the reports of Marie Antoinette responding with "let them eat cake" when she was told the
I remember this. Why do I know this? That's what I'm saying. He said the name, and I was like, why do I know this name? And then he said, let them eat cake. And then I was like, why do I know this? Dang. Let me find out I'm smart. Let me find out I'm actually turned smart, chat. Hold on, bro.
Since Rata bread did not help. It summed up the attitude of the aristocracy and showed them to be completely out of touch with the common citizens. There's just one tiny problem. She almost definitely did not say it. The actual phrase shown here, which literally means let them eat brioche, was first seen in this book. In this book, Rousseau recounts an anecdote about a great princess who, upon hearing that the peasants had no bread, said they could eat brioche
Smart man
instead.
Stan.
The problem is, in 1767, Marie was still living in Austria, and she was 12 years old. The quote is probably about an entirely different figure, maybe Maria Theresa of Spain or another 18th century royal. Marie was known for her extravagant lifestyle and was called Madame Deficit because her spending occurred at a time when France was seriously in debt. Making a scapegoat of Marie was a lot easier than dealing with the real causes like war debts and a broken tax system. There's also a chance she got a pretty bad rap because while she did have a pretty bougie lifestyle, that was kind of expected from the actual queen of a major country. But she also engaged in acts of charity and showed concern for the welfare of not just her children, but also the poor.
Right.
She donated to orphanages, patronized hospitals, and even tried to reform the court's extravagances.
Right.
And in the end, none of that mattered. You could argue that let them eat cake was one of the first memes, and like a lot of memes out there today, it didn't matter if it was true or not, it only mattered that a huge number of people believed it. Unlike most modern day memes, this one had real consequences, especially for Marie and her husband. They woke up in the morning with their heads firmly attached to their bodies and ended the day with their heads in a basket. The War of Worlds broadcast. On October 30th, 1938, people who tuned into CBS radio heard something that they were not expecting.
Okay.
Specifically, an invasion from Mars. Although if you tuned in at the beginning,
We get
you heard a
invaded from
disclaimer
Mars
the
like
young
every
director of the
week. We get an invasion every week, bro.
Mercury Theater, Orson Welles, telling everyone that this was just an adaptation of his novel, The War of Worlds.
Right.
They also announced it about halfway through, but by that time, people were too busy
Oh,
crowding the roads trying to escape
wow.
or jumping out of windows. Because they obviously didn't want to fight the aliens. At least that's what the newspapers wanted you to believe. Welles, who was just 23 at the time, was the creative force behind the Mercury Theater on the Air, a weekly dramatic radio program. He wanted to do a modernized version of the War of the Worlds, showing it as a series of live news bulletins interrupting regular programming. The reports became more and more frantic as they reported on explosions from Mars, a strange cylinder found in New Jersey, and finally increasing death and destruction as the invaders made their way across New Jersey, unleashing death rays and poison gas. In fairness, that doesn't sound too different from modern day New Jersey. It's been pointed.
Nah, Rod, you gotta get. No, it's not Rod. Rod not from Jersey. Is Rod from Jersey? No, he from Philly. Who from Jersey? Yo, Swave, you can't let that slide, bro. So you gotta do something, bro.
Now, this was far from something that everyone was listening to. Most estimates place the War of the Worlds audience at under 1 million listeners, which is a fraction of the country's population. So why did the newspapers exaggerate the response and how many people were freaking out? We can sum it up in one word. Fear. The newspaper owners figured that if they could show how radio inflamed listeners and caused unnecessary panic, people would stop listening and come back to the newspapers. That was a pretty funny theory considering it did exactly the opposite. And if you think about it, that was very ironic. The media is trying to freak people out with half-truths and fake news just to get more engagement.
That's literally. You know what's so crazy though? We went from denouncing the news to doing this to now it's literally just happening to streamers at a crazy rate. Like literally there is, what's the word? Is it a revolution? Is that what I'm looking for? But there's literally like a crazy, I think the word is revolution, a crazy revolution that's happening in real time where streamers and Twitch streaming and live streaming is gonna have to address the problem of fake news the same way that the US ended up having to address problems and come up with things for fake news. Because right now there's no infrastructure for fake news. Anybody could put out anything fake about a streamer. It could get attention, it could garner attention, it could hurt their product, it could hurt their brand, it could hurt them, it could hurt people next to them. And the person who put out the false statements can face no repercussions unless the streamer is a millionaire and can hire lawyers to sue everybody. But literally right now, where we're at right now, we're going through this that he's talking about, which is the, falsification of just news, bro.
Very ironic. The media is trying to freak people
Yes, sir.
out with
Happy
half-truths and fake news just to get more engagement. Sure is lucky we don't fall for that kind of stuff anymore.
Yeah, see, look.
Anyway, it's time to talk about Jesus. Before we talk about Jesus likely not being born on December 25th, rest assured, you can still sing carols, wear ugly sweaters, and totally burn your coworkers in the white elephant gift exchange. And you can still do all those things in December. But if you want to change your Christmas celebration to spring or late fall, I'm not here to judge.
Right.
Bible scholars have long debated the exact date of Jesus' birth. For a
There's
book
no
that
more
isn't shy about
basketball.
voicing an opinion on just about everything, it's remarkably silent about when the main character was born. Well, at least the main character who shows up in the second act. The Gospels of Matthew and Luke, which are the only ones that talk about Jesus' birth, don't even mention a month or a date or a season.
Oh,
But
yeah,
here's what
facts.
they do say. Luke mentions that shepherds were in the fields tending their flocks at night when the angel announced Jesus' birth.
Yep.
But December would have been a weird time for shepherds to be out with their flocks.
Yep.
It was cold, the footing was often
Yep.
treacherous, and that was typically a time where the sheep would
Yeah.
likely be under the cover of winter or sheepfolds. Of course, because it's religion, not everyone agrees. The Eastern Orthodox Church celebrated on January 6th, and others celebrated in the spring or fall, like
I'm not gonna lie, I do not look at it as like the birthday. I look at it like, dang, I get presents today, we're lit. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I see this all
March
the time.
25th, April 6th, or like September. So why the 25th? Well, the kids are out of school, travel's
Happy
often
early birthday,
treacherous,
Riri.
and everyone looks better in a sweater. Or another explanation is that the Christians and Roman Emperor Constantine kind of borrowed the date from two very popular pagan holidays. Sol Invictus, which honored the sun god and took place around the winter solstice, and Saturnalia, a week-long festival of gift-giving, feasting, and general debauchery that ended around
Week-long.
December 23rd. And by repurposing those holidays, they hope to convert some more people to the cause and celebrate the Son of God instead of the sun. The
Ha.
Salem Witch Trials. When people think of the Salem Witch Trials, the
Burning
image that's
woman.
most likely to come to mind is some unfortunate woman tied
Yep.
to a stake with the
Is that
flames
not
growing
accurate?
higher and higher as the bloodthirsty crowd roars with approval. Even though the US wasn't officially a country yet, this chapter in their history was a black mark for the colonies and served to show what happens when rumor, hysteria, and religious fervor are allowed to spread like wildfire among the population. Sorry, maybe a bit too soon for that one. It all started when several young girls began exhibiting strange, convulsive behavior. They claimed they were being tormented by witches. The girls accused local women of practicing witchcraft, and panic spread like wildfire. Last one.
That's
I promise.
crazy.
And soon the courts were overwhelmed with cases. And when we're talking about hysteria, it was go big or go home in Salem. From February 1692 to May 1693, 200 people were accused of witchcraft, 30 were convicted, and 20 were executed. But here's the
Damn.
surprising part. No one was burned at the stake. That
Wow.
was more of a European punishment. Think Joan of Arc. But unlike the Beatles or Rolling Stones, it never really caught on in the US. So in a real good news, bad news situation, the convicted witches were still executed, they just did it by hanging instead. Well, 19 of the 20 were hanged. The 20th was a man named Miles Corey, who was pressed to death with heavy stones for refusing to enter a plea. You gotta admit, what the Puritans lacked in fairness and common sense, they made up for in coming up with a unique and especially
I thought this was like they're trying to steal wives, or they did it on girls who were trying to steal their wives type of thing once it got figured out. Because I thought it was like witch, and then it was like, oh, they were just targeting people they didn't like, and then everybody started using it to target people they didn't like. That's what I thought it was.
sadistic punishments. So why is Salem associated with the burning of witches? As we talked about earlier, burning was big in places like Germany, Scotland, and France. Thousands of people, mainly women, were burned at the stake during the 15th through 17th centuries after being accused of witchcraft. One place where that didn't happen was England. The Brits preferred hanging because, they're classy like that. Their tradition became jumbled with the story of Salem. Later generations began to assume that the notorious witch trials in New England must have followed the same gruesome rituals. And then pop culture grabbed hold. Films, books, plays, and even Halloween decorations. All picturing scenes of women in colonial garb being tied to stakes and set ablaze. Yep. Paul Revere time. Paul Revere wore a lot of hats. Well, he probably just wore that one tricorn hat, but he had a lot of different jobs. Revere
Shout out
was a
Paul Revere.
silversmith,
The
time
British are
patriot
coming. That's Paul Revere, right? Paul Revere. The British are coming. The British. That's him.
who was part of the Sons of Liberty. The group you may remember from a little thing called the
Or am I
Boston Tea
lying?
Party.
Did I make
And
that
on
up?
the night of April 18th, 1775, Revere was tasked with riding from Boston to Lexington. His job was to warn Samuel Adams and John Hancock that British troops were marching to arrest them and to seize military supplies stockpiled by colonial militias. But Paul wasn't the only rider who had that job. William Dawes was given a different route out of Boston a little earlier than Revere, in case one of them was
Yes.
captured.
Okay, bet.
Once they
Dang,
met
I'm
up
kind
in
of smart today, bro. I'm telling you, bro. Something in the air.
Lexington by Dr. Samuel Prescott, a local physician who just happened to be out late visiting his fiancée. And shortly after they met up, the trio encountered a British patrol. Dawes escaped, but was forced to abandon his horse and walk back. Paul was interrogated and released, also without his horse. In fact, only the doctor was the one who made it through. So why do we only know about Paul Revere? We have Washington Irving to thank for that. In 1861, on the eve of the Civil War, the poet wanted to fire up the country and inspire unity and patriotism. His poem began, "Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere." What's not to love? It's catchy, it rhymes, and it sounds a lot better than "Listen, my children,
Right.
and try not to talk."
Of course.
I'll tell you the story
Understandable.
of the doc. Catherine the Great. Throughout history, rulers have met with some untimely and bizarre deaths. But it would be hard to top the story of the demise of Catherine the Great of Russia. You might know what I'm talking about. The the story of how Catherine met her demise while attempting to build a more intimate relationship with a horse. One of the most popular accounts describes her as lying on a platform and then the horse slipped and she was crushed to death. By the way, if you've never heard the story, I'm sorry for giving you the visual. That will be in your head forever.
Yeah.
But here's the deal. It never happened. Horses are known for their stability, and it would be very unlikely to just slip. I'm joking. That's not the ridiculous part. She actually died of a stroke at age 67 while on the toilet. Just like Elvis. Thank you. Thank you very much. So where did this story of horse-related death start? It's actually just a story as old as time. Pissed off white guys who were jealous of her success as Empress of Russia.
Wait, you're making me
She
miss
took
my
over
cue. Tale as old as time. Best is on the sea. Beauty and the Beast. I don't know the actual lyrics. I'm so sorry.
After her husband, Peter III, was deposed in the coup.
Because he said a tale as old as time, and then it made me think of Beauty and the Beast, bruh.
She ruled for 35 years and was known for her forward thinking.
Song
She was a
as
huge
old as
factor in modernizing
rhyme.
Russia. But this was also a time when women were expected to be modest, obedient, and domestic. And Catherine was none of those things.
Right.
She thought for herself, wouldn't back down, and worst of all, was very open with her sexuality and had numerous partners. In other words, she was a huge threat to the patriarchy, and the myth was created to punish her, even after her death, transforming her reputation as a respected monarch into that of a grotesque figure of ridicule. This myth kind of shows a familiar pattern in which powerful women are often demonized. Cleopatra, Mary Queen of Scots, Marie Antoinette, and many others have been subjected to pretty similar rumors. Anyway, if you like this video, make sure to subscribe and click this video over here.
Kelvin, amazing history. I appreciate it. If you guys enjoyed the video and learning some new things about history, make sure that you like, comment twice. It helps me in the algo. I'll see you in the next one.